Tenente-Coronel do Exército dos Estados Unidos, Francisco Leija, é especialista em estratégia de combate aplicada à segurança pública. Formado em Sociologia pela Kansas State University, tem mestrado em Relações Internacionais pela Norwich University e em Liderança Estratégica e Militar pela Escola de Estudos Avançados Militares do Exército dos Estados Unidos. Entre 2005 e 2008, lecionou na Academia de West Point, a principal escola militar dos Estados Unidos, formadora de oficiais para o Exército americano. Nós passamos, então, a palavra ao jornalista Marcelo Rech para a condução desta atividade com o especialista em segurança pública, coronel do Exército dos Estados Unidos, Frank Leija.
Vou dispensar o headset. Eu não sou presidente da Associação Nacional de Jornalistas, mas da Associação Nacional de Jornais. Mas como jornalista, eu tenho uma certa experiência anterior, como correspondente de guerra, ter estado em diferentes frentes de batalha, na Europa, na Iugoslávia, no Golfo, etc. E é uma honra para mim estar ao lado do coronel Francisco Leija, que é um combatente de linha de frente, mas que em nenhum momento, na sua longa experiência de uma temporada no Iraque, 2 temporadas no Afeganistão, e no Afeganistão ele esteve numa das províncias mais arriscadas, mais tensas, que é a província de Kandahar. Em nenhum momento o Francisco abdicou da sua formação, da sua preparação teórica, né? Como já foi mencionado no currículo dele, tem uma extensa formação em estudos militares avançados, em estratégia e em ciências sociais. Portanto, eu não vou me alongar ainda mais, eu acho que está todo mundo com muita expectativa de ouvir a experiência da linha de frente associada aos conhecimentos teóricos que o coronel Francisco Leija vai nos propiciar a partir de agora. Please, welcome. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Porto Alegre. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. It has been wonderful to experience your city, your culture, and your country. I could not be more excited to join you here today to see the great work of the Institute, and more importantly, to see a community come together, unified for one purpose, lowering violence and improving public safety. Almost 1 year ago, I was able to meet one of your residents. He was describing the situation in Porto Alegre, the situation that concerned him with violence for children, for many families, for law-abiding citizens. His remarks that evening were full of courage, hope, and most importantly, had a vision which this afternoon has been fulfilled. When he called and asked to see if I could speak with you here today on the changes of New York City and some of the lessons that I had learned along the way, I was honored to join him to stand bravely as a community to change the city, to lower the violence. I would like to begin my official remarks here this afternoon by stating that I am here as a private citizen of the United States and that my opinions do not reflect in any way any official policy or position of America. I have had the privilege to be able to serve my country for over 26 years. In those 26 years, I've been able to move and live in 19 different cities in my country. I visited every state, all 50 states, Hawaii. I've lived in Alaska for 4 years. I've experienced the South, the mountains, the West Coast, and the East Coast. The entire time, my entire life, I have been a huge fan and a student of governance. To me, governance is a balance on one end with people that receive services from their government, and on the other end, from a government that's trying to manage a city. Depending on the level of services that a government produces, the citizens are able to pay their taxes and pay attention and subordinate themselves to the laws of the cities. That balance to me is very important. In my travels, I've been able to travel to about 27 different countries. And because of this fascination of governance, I've been able to pay attention to the citizens of different countries, whether that's Singapore, Australia, Thailand, Ireland, London, France, wherever I go, I always talk to the people to hear their ideas on their government and whether the situation is fair or not fair. It's very important for me. Having done that and having had the privilege to be able to teach at a university and having been able to receive the tools to be able to reflect and be able to establish principles and conclusions, which I hope to one day be able to put to good use, has been a privilege of mine, and I hope to be able to share some of those experiences here with you today. My remarks today will focus essentially on three things, which is the change to a social society, which is very difficult to do, the reality of public perceptions, and the importance of community engagement. I'm going to begin with social change, and I'm going to begin with New York City. Rudy Giuliani has been attributed as the leader that was able to bring social change to New York City and be able to decrease the violence. He gave some public remarks in 1998, which, as most of you know, the change occurred from 90 to about 2000. So 98, he had already achieved some of that change and had been able to display to the world that change was possible in New York City. I'd like to begin by citing two small pieces of his public remarks. I quote, "Over the last 5 years, New York City has turned around. We've gone from being a city with more than 2,000 murders every year in the early 90s to a city with fewer than 800 murders last year, the lowest of murders in 31 years. Overall crime has dropped 44% over the last 4 years. If you would have asked people 5 years ago whether this was possible, they would have doubted it. I would have doubted it," says Giuliani. Then he continues, "But that attitude was precisely part of the problem. When you make very little improvement and expect little of yourself, you tend to settle for whatever single improvement you can get. But when you believe that your work is never done, achievements aren't reasons to rest or be satisfied. Achievements are proof that we can make a difference and that they make it incumbent on all of us to go forward and do more. Porto Alegre, you are New York City 5 years ago. 5 years from now, citizens of this country, citizens of this city will be able to ask themselves, would you have believed that 5 years ago you will have the same success that New York City has because of the community that stands in front of us here today? The story of New York City has changed the level of violence, and it has been described as one of the most remarkable stories in the history of urban crime. Many scholars have attempted to describe this logic. Some scholars had said it's about the economy. They had a 39% decrease in unemployment. Other scholars have said it's about the police. We have broken window policy, and we've been able to be more strict. Other scholars had said, no, it's about a statistical approach labeled CompStat for police departments that actually made the difference. Other scholars had said it's a combination of the three, and I could create a recipe, a step-by-step guide on how to replicate New York City success. I would tell you that no recipe is going to be able to be followed true and true. In strategy school for the military, we study principles. We study principles because we understand that a step-by-step action to replicate the most important thing in the battlefield, which is achieving the element of surprise on your enemy, is very difficult to achieve and almost impossible to replicate. You have to be able to understand the sequence of the principles in which you are applying to be able to deliver surprise each and every single time. 3 principles that I want to go ahead and discuss with you here from the New York City situation. One of them is going to be the power of vision, which is very important, and I'll discuss here in a second. The second one is going to be the respect for the police department, and the third one is going to be the involvement of coalitions. I'll begin with social change. I'll begin with a vision. So whenever you ever hear the press or any type of articles describe ideas, ideas sometimes have unintended consequences. In 1979, there was an article in New York City. Remember, the change happened in the 90s. In 79, there was an article labeled "On Subway Graffiti in New York." It captured the concept that planted the seed in New York City residents that graffiti, disorderly persons, and criminals are all part of an uncontrollable world of predators. This article enabled a public belief which defined associations between crimes and the belief that lower crimes lead to decreased conditions in public spaces. Eventually, to a loss of public order, which makes more serious crimes easier to commit and harder to detect. This idea also gave rise to the socially unacceptable crimes and actions, the crimes that a society sometimes feels are unacceptable and causes citizens of the community to come forward to prevent or report. Very important. More importantly, although it took almost a decade, this is the very idea that the article set and created for Giuliani to set conditions to form a strong, common vision for the 1990s to succeed. The second principle with regards to public trust, and I think a Harvard Business Review article best describes the situation. The article's name is called "Tipping Point Leadership." I quote, "In February of 1994, William Bratton was appointed police commissioner of New York City. The odds were against him. The New York Police Department had a $2 billion budget, a workforce of 35,000 police officers, and was notoriously difficult to manage. Turf wars were over jurisdiction and funding. Officers were underpaid relative to their counterparts in neighboring communities, and promotions seemed to bear little relationship to performance. Crime had gotten so far out of control that the press had referred to the Big Apple as the rotten apple. Indeed, many social scientists had concluded after 3 decades of increases that New York City crime was impervious to police intervention. The best police could do was to react to crimes once they were committed. Many cities around the world can relate to this situation. For New York, the performance was really a function of leadership. There was an element of truth for the CompStat model, which had statistics and, quite honestly, enabled the police commissioner to empower different precincts on the level of violence in each precinct, which created a level of competition within the police department to go ahead and improve the level of public safety. And he tied that to a reward system, whether that was promotions or better equipment. Lower crime in your district, you get priority on equipment, you get more promotions, and so forth. However, that change in New York City could not have happened unless the police department was already well equipped sufficiently enough to fight the criminals in New York City. If you have a police department that does not have the correct equipment to fight the criminals, it is very difficult to expect the police officer to seek confrontation every single time. If you have a police department that does not pay the police officers sufficient, where they cannot live in a different place that the very criminals that they are protecting the citizens from have to share the same schools and their same communities, then you cannot expect them to go ahead and fight every single day as they have a pure integrity to their unit. If you have a police department that does not have pathways to go ahead and improve your life individually through social services, you cannot be disappointed if you have a police department or you have individuals in a police department that simply want to go ahead and do their time and retire. That is a false expectation. I have personally seen that in different countries, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in some other parts of the United States, in other countries that I have traveled. Police departments vary very much, just like every other aspect of governance. You have to have a well-structured organization that's well-equipped, well-paid, and most important, is considered to be a profession within a community. In Singapore, mothers tell their children when they grow up, good sons do not become soldiers. And that struck me very hard because I'm a soldier myself. And so when I started asking more about this saying that they have there, it became very obvious that their mothers felt that being a businessman or a banker or a president of a university may be better than being a soldier. So I say to you here in Porto Alegre, how can you change the program? How could you change the society where mothers and children are able to hear a narrative that say, you too can be a police officer, that they are equally as good as an educator or they are equally as good as a banker. Someone else in this audience here happened to share to me that when they travel sometimes to the United States, we have at airports a line and we give preference to military members. So military members could go first before first class members can go. And that they like that very much. And I told him that in the 1960s, the military was almost one of the bottom professions in America. But in the 1990s, it was the #1 profession in America, the most trusted by the public. There was a lot of hard work that went into that effort, but it is possible. I would like to go ahead and change now to the concept of perceptions and engagements. One of the previous panelists here spoke about complexity and how difficult that is to manage. And so David Axelrod, one of President Obama's advisors, has written a book called Harnessing Complexity. In that book, he describes complexity as multiple systems that are operating at the very same time. And each one of those systems has different conceptual lines going through there, whether it's just an individual, a strategy, and a goal, or a group of individuals. But when you go ahead and put them all together, that's where you get a complex situation. And sometimes, for example, like the situation that occurs in prisons in America, prisons here, prisons everywhere, where you establish, for example, a small black market inside of a prison, there's no system that's going to allow you to go ahead and change that directly. But that is tied to multiple systems around it, and you could impact those systems to be able to move that position in a direction that you want to go. So that is something that is very important to me, and I wanted to share that with you. The power of coalitions that I mentioned earlier can best be described by one of the great social mobilizers of America named John Gardner. He was fascinated by what America had done during World War II to bring a lot of people out of nowhere to solve national and social problems. And so he believed that coalitions, he called them fellowships, of different professionals, businessmen, lawyers, doctors, so forth and so on, could go ahead and work together to solve the problems. And only in a coalition where you had different people, whether they were from the public sector or the private sector, would you truly be able to solve large-scale problems. And so when you look at Giuliani, he was able to do that through the university, the police department, and all of the sectors of governance in New York City to be united, to come together. I'd like to conclude, in respect for your time, by stating that it's very clear to me that the city of Porto Alegre has been working very hard to this moment of time, that you have come together as a community, which I applaud you very much, and I am humbled to be here in front of you today. But more importantly, I would like to go ahead and recognize the police, because with that public perception, with that community awareness that we're trying to lower violence, that we're trying to increase public safety, it is clear that the citizens of this city are going to go ahead and expect more police officers to endanger their life to go ahead and secure the citizens. And they have not abandoned you, Porto Alegre. They have stood firmly next to you, and they continue to stay there. So I say to you, thank you very much for giving me some time to speak to you. I wish you the wisdom to work together as a coalition, and I wish you the courage that you have displayed as individual citizens of this city to step forward and take the first step to combating violence. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Francisco. Yo voy a hablar un poco de portuñol, porque Francisco es de origen hispánica y comprende bien español.
Claro.
Si usted quiere responder en español o en inglés, como quiera. ¿Okay?
Gracias.
Gracias. Francisco, coronel, una de las cosas que nosotros oímos acá y oímos por toda parte en Brasil es que hay mucha discusión, muchos diagnósticos sobre la situación de la criminalidad, pero poco se ve acciones integradas, común iniciativas que han sido realmente de suceso de una forma generalizada en el país. Hay experiencias acá y allá, pero no generalizada. Por su experiencia de ter estado en más de 20 países, ¿cuáles son las características comunes que producen la reversión de los índices de criminalidad para abajo?
Las características de departamentos de policías y de gobiernos que han podido cambiar la situación, como en Afganistán o Irak o Nueva York City, Singapur es otro buen ejemplo. Uno, como dije antes, el respeto a la policía es muy importante, pero más importante, el respeto es lo más posible si toda la policía tiene principios que son consistentes y que todo el tiempo son hechos muy disciplinadamente. Cuando hay inconsistency, el público no puede dar la confianza universalmente. Eso es algo que es muy importante. Segunda parte que es importante, he experienciado diferentes departamentos de policía y hasta nuestro ejército de Marines en los Estados Unidos tiene un programa igual que en lugar de buscar a gente, a ciudadanos que quieran ser miembros de una profesión para una carrera de 20 o 30 años, los tratan de agarrar para venir solamente 1, 2 o 3 años y regresar a sus carreras, a ser maestros o a trabajar en negocio o a trabajar en el gobierno. Y el concepto que es importante en ese principio es que la policía ahora tiene embajadores que son ciudadanos privados trabajando diferentes cosas como usted y que puede decir un día, hace 10 años, yo también fui policía porque yo quise ser, no porque tuve que ser policía.
¿Cómo se logra obtener en la sociedad este objetivo común? Una visión común para enderezar la solución efectiva.
Sí. Como estoy hablando de Nueva York City, estaba compartiendo con otra amistad este fin de semana que el modelo que Giuliani siguió se llama Cotter's Change Model y tiene unos cuantos de pasos de hacer. Hay dos maneras de agarrar una visión. Claro, un líder que es muy carismático, que puede convencer a la gente de la visión. Y el segundo, que la comunidad misma, por frustración o por querer tener electricidad o comida o agua o less violence, ¿verdad?, va a tratar de llamar a radio shows, va a tratar de dar entrevistas de televisión o va a tratar de tener una voz más pública para que un líder pueda agarrar esa frustración y convertirla en una visión.
Okay. Colonel, I'm asked to change the speech from Spanish to English.
All right.
Because there is no simultaneous translation for Spanish. It's okay for... so let's go back to English, right? Okay? But I'm gonna address the questions in Portuguese. I think it's better. If you can use the headset, it will be fine. Okay? Do you have it on? Yeah? Thank you. Okay? It's working? Ok. Tem uma pergunta de um colega seu do Exército Brasileiro, Coronel Mário Andreasa, que pergunta se o senhor acha que os 3 princípios que fizeram sucesso no combate ao crime na cidade de Nova York são aplicáveis a outros países como o Brasil. E se a diferença entre o sistema, o aparato jurídico, pode ser um fato desfavorável para o Exército e as polícias brasileiras.
So I do believe that the three principles that were followed in New York City could be relevant here in Brazil. Whenever you think of a common vision, that's something that's very important to be able to unify. Clearly here, you could see that the ICF has been able to provide a common vision that has inspired a lot of people, both in private business and in the public, to come forward. The second point that described here in New York City was the ability to go ahead and have respect for the police department. I have been able to travel this weekend and have been able to see the pride in every police officer with their new vehicle and their nice emblem for ICF. So I could clearly see that more equipment, better training, increases in the police force is going to go ahead and only help towards the concept of respect for the police. So, and the last piece, of course, is the coalition, right? So ICF is synonymous with building that coalition, and the true potential with ICF, quite honestly, could be a function of creating multiple coalitions for different problem sets to improve the society overall. I know that this one here being lowering violence and improving public safety could just be the beginning of many other great recommendations for your city.
Ok. Coronel, no Brasil, no México, nos Estados Unidos, em muitos outros países, há muitas instâncias diferentes de instituições e organismos que lidam com a segurança pública. E se muito questiona, inclusive nos Estados Unidos, Brasil também, essa desintegração. Por que é tão difícil integrar as atividades de segurança de uma forma mais eficaz, mais efetiva?
So, in my opinion, and I'm coming back down to my time at Homeland Security, where I was helping build task forces for southern border immigration. You have a balance, and the balance is between individual rights and security. So today we heard one of the speakers here discussing the concept of human rights, and they had a presentation with a lot of statistics. I noticed that some of those statistics were from other countries. And so as a strategist, I always think it's very difficult when you deal with realities. If you're trying to apply a principle that everyone else is adhering to in a reality which has very high public safety, and you have the luxury to focus on certain aspects of security, as opposed to another environment where you do not have, where you fear for your life, where you have to drive with bulletproof glass, where you cannot go to certain parts of your city. That balance there is the concept of leadership.
Ok. Coronel, se diz que os militares das Forças Armadas não são formados, não são treinados para aprender e menos ainda para investigar. Você diz também até que algemas não fazem parte, digamos, do equipamento de um oficial das Forças Armadas. O senhor concorda com isso, que os oficiais, que os militares das Forças Armadas não são treinados para aprender e investigar? E como é que foi a sua experiência em relação a isso no Iraque e no Afeganistão?
That's a great question. I had to lead that mission in Iraq specifically. And our armed forces have had those challenges for several years. And so when you think of the concept of the Army, it's trained to do a very specific mission, which is win wars for some nations. I've been to other nations like Japan, and they have limited restrictions in what their Army could do. Regardless of what that is for your country, the Army is designed to do one particular function. So when you have to change them to do a separate one, for example, being a police officer, which I have had to do, the challenge there is you have to be able to train very hard to do a job, one. Two, you have to be able to decide which one you need most, the function that you were originally designed for, or this new function of the police. That's point one. Point two that I think is very difficult, I did not have, in my experience, to train a military force to become police and compete with other police.
Como assim?
We had to build another police department. Whenever you're competing with the military and the police, I think that there is, again, a balance between how much you want to go ahead and do with the military police, how much you want to go ahead and improve your civil police. Do you work in combination? Do you work independently? Do you surge? Do you go ahead and do it for 1 month? Do you do it for a year? Do you do it indefinitely? What I will share with you is that when I was in Iraq and we first arrived to the country in 2003, citizens of Iraq would look at American soldiers and marvel at the equipment that we had. They believed that we had X-ray glasses. They believed that we had equipment that they couldn't see. 6 months after being there, day in and day out, they knew that they were selling us soda. They knew that they were selling us the sunglasses. We had lost the edge of being able to have that perception.
Essa é uma questão que eu gostaria de ver endereçada, porque tanto no Iraque quanto no Afeganistão, o exército americano, as forças armadas americanas encontraram um sistema policial muito anacrônico de um lado, ou forças de segurança que restaram de um país, de países em guerra, muito anacrônicas de um lado, com uma formação muito deficiente, e de outro lado, com alto índice de corrupção. Como é que se dava a relação no alto comando, ou no comando em que você participava, entre as forças policiais altamente treinadas e motivadas, com essas forças policiais, digamos, não exatamente no padrão que o exército americano está acostumado?
So I think using your question and focusing, acknowledging the time that we have, so out of respect for your time, I think that the powerful component of your question is to be able to, and it comes back to leadership, to be able to identify the people that are at higher capacity, whether in our case it may have been NATO forces or non-NATO forces. In some cases, it may be military forces or civil forces. In other cases, it may be a precinct force versus another precinct force, whatever the case is, to be able to counterbalance it. A security force assistance model is an example of that, where you have a small element that the leader believes is superior to integrate with a larger element that may not have the same capability, so they could teach them, coach them, and provide oversight to make sure that they're increasing in capability. It makes no sense to be able to do nothing, and if you know that you have an element that is not the same as this element, to just allow that element to continue.
O que, na sua opinião, funcionava no patrulhamento, no policiamento, no patrulhamento que vocês faziam no Iraque e no Afeganistão? O que era mais eficaz do ponto de vista de operação? A força bruta ou a prevenção, a ação social?
So I think, once again, to your question, the power in his question that I learned humbly is that as a police officer or as a military member, the civilian population is always observing you. They are always judging you. And you cannot expect a community to be able to look every single time you do something good. And naturally, with the press and communities just talking, everybody focuses on when something goes wrong. So it really requires a lot of discipline. Some police departments in America have integrated cameras into the police officers to do two things. One, obviously, to make sure, through leadership, that they have an ability to combat a civilian with a cell phone that has a videotape of the police officer doing something bad. The police officer's video may be able to show what led to that situation, which was a series of other violent crimes that were not captured on that video. So.
Agora, os Estados Unidos se retiraram do Afeganistão e do Iraque, formalmente, mas eu gostaria de uma avaliação sua, se ao longo dos anos, sobretudo no Afeganistão, onde você teve mais tempo, houve uma melhora na percepção das tropas americanas, pelo ponto de vista da população civil, ou houve uma piora? E quais são os motivos para isso?
Right, so that question really comes down to the concept of perceptions and realities. When you take the two examples of Iraq and Afghanistan, in one country, you had a society like yourself, like us in America, very functioning, happy, economy, enjoyment, and then there was war, right? Chaos. So in Afghanistan, they had a situation where they had been at war for 30 years, which meant that multiple generations had grown up in the concept of war, which really comes down to the concept of hope. In one country, you had citizens that you were working with that had hope to return to what they knew already. In another country, you had citizens you were working with that were hopeless. They did not, they never knew what it was to be normal. So I think that over time, the public perception in both countries for American troops went up and down.
E o que foi mais efetivo para ser, digamos assim, positivo? Eu estou fazendo essa pergunta porque nós estamos vivendo, como você sabe, uma intervenção das Forças Armadas brasileiras, em particular do Exército, no Rio de Janeiro. E embora haja uma ampla maioria da população a favor desta intervenção, há setores, há segmentos, que as pesquisas mostram de 20% a 30%, que não avaliam positivamente essa intervenção. O que deveria ser feito, na sua opinião, para que houvesse, digamos, maior efetividade na percepção pública de uma intervenção, como a que ocorre, por exemplo, nas situações de Forças Armadas em populações civis?
So a couple of points, and I mentioned this earlier in a previous interview. Whenever you're at a situation in governance where you are at a loss of options, you typically tend to look at anything that's feasible to apply to solve the problem, such as militarizing an entire city to go ahead and decrease the violence. The things that could do to be improved is obviously a clear narrative from leadership to be able to say, we will do this because of this reason, for this amount of time, and we will measure it and report back or reassess for this amount of time. The second piece that has to be done through leadership and the society, the citizens, is to be able to understand what you lose when you gain something. So a lot of the times you select an artifact to go ahead and solve a problem, not realizing what you were going to lose with the existing principles. This is a common argument in our country with regards to constitutional rights. As we continue to go forward, that's why we typically go back to the principles.
Coronel, na sua passagem pelo Iraque, especialmente, você teve uma experiência com prisões, administração, gestão de prisões. O que você aprendeu nessa sua experiência? Até porque aqui no Brasil, em Porto Alegre, não sei se você tem conhecimento, acredito que sim, a Brigada Militar está presente em diferentes momentos, diferentes situações, e na gestão e controle de prisões também.
Right. So, in my humble experience, I clearly did not run a prison the sizes, of your prisons here. But what was very important is obviously the individual discipline of each soldier to be able to perform their job, the attention to details and the principles that we had established. But without a doubt, the most important part was oversight. If the checker does not check, the doer is not going to do.
E nem sempre as prisões iraquianas ou afegãs, não sei qual o conhecimento que você tem, seriam comparáveis às situações das prisões brasileiras?
Right. So I don't have, looking at the prisons with the headlines and the large operations that were in the news, I don't have that much experience there. But I think it's very clear from public statements of our government that they could admit that there was mistakes there and that the concept of oversight, which I mentioned earlier, is paramount when you're running the lives of other people in a prison.
Ok. Quando eu gostaria de mudar um pouquinho para a gestão da segurança e falar um pouquinho sobre o uso de dados, de data, no combate ao crime. Qual é a sua experiência, qual é a sua visão de presente e de futuro, sobretudo com o uso de inteligência artificial e com grandes bancos de dados para combater a criminalidade?
So in my opinion, the concept of artificial intelligence really comes down to the function of being able to make decisions. What decisions need to be made by humans and what decisions need to be made, delegated to a computer or something automatic. That's going to be a concept that globally we're going to struggle with for at least the next decade. And it is going to be a balance. And I'm sure there's going to be mistakes and back and forth. When it comes to public security here, as I understand the situation, a small level of technological advancements are going to make a significant difference in the organization, the application of law enforcement, and most importantly, in the investigation aspects at the civil level.
Na sua opinião, que funções policiais não poderão jamais ser delegadas, do ponto de vista de gestão, para computadores ou inteligência artificial, e quais são algumas que provavelmente migrarão para algo mais automatizado?
That's great. That's a great question. 2 points. The first point I stand very strict behind, which is the function of morality. You could never delegate the concept of morality to a machine. It has to be a human decision, and it has to be a human decision because there has to be a responsibility for those decisions. With regards to what can be delegated to machines, clearly establishing a pattern of being able to have information that's essential when you have a criminal apprehended is very important. And if you have a system of paperwork or if you have a system of communication, that's going to be less effective than if you have a digital system that you could immediately see everything of the person that you're dealing with right now. Even better if you could see it before you pull them over.
Ok. Coronel, uma pergunta controversa e polêmica. A rivalidade entre polícias, departamentos e distritos é sempre algo negativo ou pode ser também transformado em algo positivo?
Could you restate your question? I don't think I understand.
Eu gostaria, por exemplo, eu sei que em Nova York há uma certa competição entre distritos policiais por quem é mais eficaz, mais efetivo. Essa rivalidade, ela é sempre negativa ou ela pode ser positiva? Essa competição.
Yeah. So the competition really comes down again to the function of leadership. And so it's the leader's job to be able to reassess over and over when you're getting more negative than positive, and then being able to apply the change. And vice versa, as I stated in my comments, when you expect to achieve 10, it's the leader's job to assess, to see when all of a sudden you can achieve 20 or 30 and apply the change required to do that.
Ok. Coronel, no Brasil, no Rio Grande do Sul não é diferente, nós temos muito mais policiais feridos e mortos em ação do que seria minimamente tolerável ou admissível. É uma tragédia gigantesca nas nossas sociedades. Cada vez que um policial é ferido, cada vez que um policial é morto. Eu gostaria que o senhor agora falasse um pouco da sua experiência pessoal, a sua experiência de ter recebido o Purple Heart, de ser ferido em combate, e que mensagem o senhor dá para os combatentes nossos do dia a dia.
For your police?
Para essa plateia, por exemplo, e para todos os policiais enfim, todas as pessoas que lidam com segurança a partir da sua própria experiência. Queria que o senhor contasse um pouco como foi a sua experiência de ser ferido em combate e que mensagem o senhor deixa para esses policiais.
So the message that I leave is two, okay, which is very important. And it's taken me a lot of years to understand it a bit better. I shared my story with Marcelo, play by play, on my own experience. But what I have concluded is, one, training does make a difference. So if you train with repetition over and over and over again, you will know what the right thing to do is when facing a tough situation. Along that line, I will tell you that the decisions you have to make are in a split second and really come down to intuition, which leads to my second point, to the public. So if the first one was to the police officers here, the second one is to the public. And it's very difficult to cast judgment on people that have to make split decisions on behalf of your own security. So I have to deal with that reality myself in my personal life with decisions that not only in that case, but in other cases that I had in combat, that I had leaders that either made a bad decision or a good decision. The person that made the good decision doesn't think twice, doesn't think he's a better person than another person, but the person that made the bad decision lives with a horrible regret throughout their entire life. So.
Ok. Coronel, muito obrigado. Chegamos ao fim do nosso painel. Eu agradeço muito. Em nome do Leonardo aqui, presente também, de toda a direção do Instituto Cultural Floresta. Coronel, muito obrigado. Thank you very much for your time and your visits to Porto Alegre, Brazil.
Thank you very much. Gracias, Porto Alegre.